In the early years of the Second World War, among the convoys, dockyards, and the gathering storm of conflict, an unlikely naval hero appeared. Not a man, not a ship, a dog. His name was just Nuisance, the only canine ever officially enlisted in the Royal Navy. Born in April 1937 in Rondebosch, a suburb of Cape Town, he was sold to Benjamin Cheney, who later moved to Simonstown to run the United Services Institute. It was here that Nuisance would find his true home. He was a Great Dane, immense in size and impossible to ignore. Yet, despite his bulk, he carried himself with a calm, easy manner. The sailors stationed there quickly grew fond of him, and he of them. Wherever they went, he followed. That included their journeys into Cape Town on the train during shore leave. Nuisance developed a remarkable routine. After joining his shipmates at the pub and drinking his customary 2 pints of beer, he would keep a careful watch on them. If anyone wandered too far, he rounded them up, and when the last train back to Simonstown was due, he herded them aboard. Once the carriages rattled into the station at the end of the line, he patrolled up and down, nudging the weary sailors awake, making sure none were left behind. One young sailor, Oliver Trier, remembered his first encounter with the dog vividly. In late 1940, Trier arrived in Simonstown aboard HMS Canton. It wasn't long before he noticed a gigantic Great Dane boarding the train, completely unattended. What struck him most was the dog's confidence. Nuisance always chose the first-class carriage, and if the seats were already full, he simply picked one, shoved the occupants onto the floor with his massive head, and stretched out full length. No one protested. In fact, Trier recalled, the sailors thought it was hilarious. But Nuisance was more than a source of amusement. Trier remembered seeing him in Cape Town, wandering from pub to pub in the evening. As the night drew on, he would bark at the sailors, chivying them back to the station to catch the 11 o'clock train. Like a watchful sergeant, he made sure his men got home. Trier often wondered who fed the dog, where he lived, or whether he had an owner at all. For many, it seemed as though Nuisance simply belonged to the Navy itself. To the men of the fleet, this behaviour was charming, even inspiring. But the South African railway officials saw things differently. Frustrated at the sight of this enormous dog riding their trains without a ticket, they threatened to impound him, and, if he persisted, to have him destroyed. The outcry was immediate and loud. Sailors across the fleet demanded his protection. Their loyalty was so fierce that the Commander-in-Chief himself intervened. In an unprecedented move, the dog was formally enlisted into the Royal Navy. Up until then, he had been known as plain Nuisance, but the enlistment form required a first name and a surname, so the Navy wrote down just Nuisance, and the name stuck. He was given the rate of able seaman and placed on the books of HMS Afrikander. From that day on, Nuisance was not just a mascot or a curiosity, he was one of them. Stories of his devotion spread quickly. Sailors recalled him on the late-night trains, standing guard over the rows of sleeping comrades, warning off any civilian who came too close. He was more than a companion, he was a guardian. There was even a moment when he nearly became an Australian sailor, as HMAS Australia prepared to leave Simonstown. Some of her crew smuggled Nuisance aboard, hiding the enormous Great Dane below decks. Somehow he slipped past the officer of the watch. Perhaps, as one sailor later suggested, the officer had done a Nelson, turning a blind eye at the critical moment. But, of course, Nuisance could not stay hidden for long. Once the ship had cleared False Bay and cast off her last tug, he bounded onto the deck, proudly making his presence known. The commander spotted him instantly and was furious. There was no chance they could keep him on board. An improvised sling was quickly fashioned. The tug was recalled, and the reluctant stowaway was hoisted over the side and lowered back to the shore. Returned to his post at Simonstown, he continued to serve out his days with the men who loved him. The culprits who had smuggled him aboard, they were never identified. There are countless other anecdotes. At a sailor's function, he accepted a dance invitation from a young lady. He was even married twice, and the resulting puppies were sold to raise money for naval charities. Tragically, Nuisance's life was cut short by an accident. He was struck by a car, suffering serious injuries that required hospital treatment. The Navy pulled out all the stops to save him, but despite the care he received, his health deteriorated, and he passed away on his birthday in 1944. The Navy mourned deeply. The funeral was conducted with full naval honours. Sailors lined the streets of Simonstown. Ship's companies stood at attention. A procession carried him to his final resting place. Flags were lowered, salutes were fired, and the loyalty of his shipmates was clear for all to see. Even hardened sailors welled up. He had been one of them, and they would not let him be forgotten. Just Nuisance was laid to rest on a hill overlooking Simonstown, where he could keep watch over the harbour he had patrolled for so many years. From this vantage point, he gazes out over False Bay, the ships and the quaysides where he once roamed. His grave remains a place of pilgrimage, marked by a simple headstone and the memory of a dog whose courage, loyalty and gentle humour left an indelible mark on all who knew him. And many did. It's reckoned that he befriended some 10,000 sailors. Just Nuisance was not alone in earning a place in military history alongside the men he served. Across the world, animals have stood beside soldiers in times of conflict, becoming mascots, companions, and even active participants in battle. There was Sergeant Stubby, the celebrated dog of the US Army in World War I. Chips, the decorated American war dog of World War II. Simon the cat of the Royal Navy, who sailed the seas alongside his sailors, keeping watch in the mess halls, comforting the crew during long deployments, and even earning a medal for surviving a bout of infectious disease. Bamse, the Norwegian dog who became a symbol of courage and kindness, and even Wojciech, the bear who helped carry ammunition for the Polish army. Like these remarkable animals, Just Nuisance was more than a pet. He was a comrade in arms, a loyal companion, and a living symbol of the bonds formed in wartime. 4 decades after his death, in 1985, a statue was erected in Simonstown to honour him. At the base of the memorial, the inscription reads, "Just Nuisance, a loyal friend and companion of the sailors who called at this port during World War II, remembered with affection." At his sculpted feet lies his cap, proudly bearing the tally of HMS Afrikander, a reminder that he was one of the crew. He may have been just Nuisance to the railways, but to the sailors of the Second World War, he was a comrade, a guardian, and a symbol of unwavering loyalty.